What if the freest society in history is ruled by an invisible empire, and you're already serving it for free? What if everything you believed about freedom, choice, and progress was built on an algorithm, not truth? What if that little voice telling you to hustle harder, optimize more, brand yourself better, that wasn't your voice at all? That's neoliberalism, not a policy, but a ghost ideology, an invisible code running your life. It doesn't need your vote, it doesn't need your permission, it just needs you to keep going. This isn't a rant about billionaires or a dusty Cold War lecture. This is a deep dive into the operating system, beneath our economy, culture, and sense of self. It's the water we swim in, the code behind every common sense choice. Neoliberalism is why your job feels meaningless, but you still blame yourself. Why we call education a product, healthcare a service, and human beings resources. Every platform wants your content, every app your attention, every employer your passion, while giving nothing back. That's why in the richest societies in history, you feel so poor. In this video, we'll trace neoliberalism from obscure academic roots to its rule as high priest of modern capitalism. We'll meet the men who built it: Hayek, Friedman, Reagan, and Thatcher. We'll see how it conquered governments, colonized language, and rewired our values. And we'll ask, can we ever delete it? By the end, you won't just understand neoliberalism. You'll see how it swallowed the world. You'll recognize it in your paycheck, your playlist, your politics, and your reflection. Let's open the hood and look inside the machine. Start with the word. Neoliberalism is a linguistic black hole, a catch-all used by critics, centrists, and leftists alike. But what does it mean? Why the confusion? And why is that confusion a feature, not a bug? Historian Daniel Rogers puts it bluntly: neoliberalism is the linguistic omnivore of our time. In the 1990s, it barely showed up in public speech, but after the 2008 crash, it exploded. Once academic jargon, it became a rallying cry and sometimes a punchline. In theory, neoliberalism is simple. Markets, not governments, communities, or ethics, organize life best. In practice, it's fog, not a flag. It doesn't march, it seeps, and it infects our institutions, language, and sense of self. We use it to explain trade deals, gig work, Instagram hustle culture. Why politicians sound like CEOs, why CEOs act like kings. Because neoliberalism isn't one thing, it's four. It's an economic system, financialized, globalized, built on free capital and crushed labor. It's an ideology born in dusty salons, preaching market logic as ultimate truth. It's a political project, deregulation, privatization, austerity, enforced by the WTO and IMF. And it's a cultural regime, where every person becomes a startup. Each version props up the others. Together, they're the air we breathe. Here's the trick. When a word describes everything, it explains nothing. By being everywhere, it turns invisible, a magic trick that works best unnoticed. The success of neoliberalism, writes political theorist Wendy Brown, lies in its ability to erase its own name. So before we resist it, we must see it. To see it, we go back to the moment capitalism lost its grip, to the men who rebuilt it in war's shadow. We're going to Montpellier. In 1947, with the world still reeling from fascism, depression, and war, a small group of thinkers met on a Swiss mountaintop. They weren't soldiers or politicians. They were economists, journalists, and academics. Their mission? To rebuild capitalism, not as it was, but stronger, sleeker, more insulated from democracy. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was a conference. They called themselves the Montpellier Society, after the mountain they met on. Led by Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek, they shared a single belief: the real threat to freedom wasn't dictatorship, it was democracy's tendency to demand too much from markets. To them, the danger wasn't just communism, it was the entire 20th century push for welfare, unions, and planning. Hayek saw it as a slippery slope to tyranny, and so neoliberalism was born. Not to shrink the state, but to redesign it around market logic. This is key. They didn't want less government, they wanted a different government. One that would use its power not to equalize, but to protect inequality. Hayek's book, The Road to Serfdom, warned that if governments tried to plan economies, they'd eventually plan everything, including speech, belief, even thought. His vision was clear. Freedom meant protecting the market from the people. That idea caught fire with elites, not overnight, but slowly, through networks of influence, think tanks, universities, media, and business schools. The goal wasn't mass appeal. It was institutional capture. Neoliberalism didn't rise by winning elections. It rose by changing the terms of debate. As historian Quinn Slobodian explains, neoliberals wanted to encase markets, wrap them in legal armor that no democratic vote could breach, treat the market like nature, beyond politics, beyond morality, beyond challenge, and neoliberalism would be ready to crawl through. Now, let's talk structure. Neoliberalism isn't just an idea, it's a machine. Since the 1970s, this machine has reorganized global capitalism around one mission: protect capital, discipline labor, and ensure markets always win. This is neoliberalism as economy. Forget the old promises of shared growth and rising wages. In this system, growth means profit, no matter how unequal the outcome. Real-life example, Honduras. In the early 2010s, Silicon Valley-backed investors carved out a special zone on the island of Roatan. There, they could write their own laws, build their own courts, and operate without democratic oversight. When a new government tried to shut it down, the companies sued Honduras for $10 billion under international free trade treaties. That's not a glitch, that's the code. Neoliberal economies don't need to convince you, they just need to create rules you can't escape. Trade agreements, investor protections, intellectual property laws, surveillance platforms. These are the tools of a world where profit is immune from politics. As David Harvey puts it, neoliberalism is a project for restoring class power, not through tanks or coups, but through contracts, courts, and code. Under neoliberalism, states don't disappear, they become enforcers. They dismantle labor protections while beefing up police. They subsidize corporations while gutting public services. The goal isn't smaller government. It's government that serves markets, not people. And if you resist, the market punishes you. Investors flee, ratings drop, your currency collapses. This is the engine. Cold, quiet, and relentless, and it runs under the hood of your everyday life. Neoliberalism didn't arrive on clouds. It came through crisis. On spreadsheets, in suitcases, carried by consultants, enforced through conditions. Where there was chaos, it offered order, not democratic order, market order. This is neoliberalism as policy, a set of tools, deals, and mandates enforcing one gospel: profit over people. The model? Shock therapy. After the Soviet Union collapsed, neoliberal economists rushed in. Russia, Poland, the Czech Republic were told to privatize, deregulate, welfare, all at once. The result? Billionaires overnight, millions in poverty, social collapse. Russia's GDP shrank 40% in the 1990s. Life expectancy dropped. Oligarchs rose. Democracy buckled. But you didn't need to be post-communist to get the treatment. Latin America got it first, in Chile, after Pinochet's 1973 coup. The Chicago Boys economists trained in the U.S. privatized industries, killed price controls, and crushed unions. Even pensions went private. This wasn't reform, it was ideological cleansing. Naomi Klein calls it disaster capitalism, using crises to push reforms too fast to resist. In the 80s and 90s, the IMF and World Bank globalized the model. Structural adjustment programs told indebted nations, cut spending, open markets, sell assets, or else. These weren't suggestions, they were conditions. Result: schools gutted, hospitals broke, economies twisted to serve export markets. In Jamaica, local rice collapsed. Cheap U.S. imports wiped out farmers. Fast forward, Honduras. Silicon Valley libertarians created ZDs, zones free from national law, called innovation. Acted colonial. When Honduras' new government shut them down, investors sued for billions. Quinn Slobodian says, neoliberalism isn't about shrinking the state, it's about redesigning it for global capital. The pattern: crisis, reform, hollow institutions, silenced resistance, not a bug. The model. Policy is where neoliberalism bites, where ideas become eviction, where theory becomes famine, where the dream of freedom becomes your nightmare. Now we leave policy and enter the bloodstream. Neoliberalism isn't just something outside you, it gets inside. It becomes how you talk, think, live. This is neoliberalism as culture. It tells you your worth is your output, your productivity is your morality, your personality is a product, your identity is a brand. Don't ask for security, build a portfolio. Don't demand dignity, develop your human capital. On LinkedIn, you're a thought leader. On Instagram, a personal brand. On TikTok, a content creator. On dating apps, a profile optimized for market value. Work never ends. The grind is holy. Hustle is virtue. Even rest becomes a performance. Self-care is monetized. Mindfulness is a corporate tool. The result? Anxiety masked as ambition. Burnout sold as achievement. And here's the kicker. When you fail, it's your fault. Not the economy, not your employer, not the system. Neoliberalism turns structural violence into personal failure. It makes you the manager of your own exploitation. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han puts it, neoliberalism replaces the violence of others with self-violence. You blame yourself for not being optimized enough, marketable enough, worthy enough. In this world, competition replaces community, branding replaces belief, clicks replace convictions. This is not just economic logic, it's existential engineering, and it works best when you don't even know it's happening. Neoliberalism is not content with ruling economies and politics, it wants your soul. Welcome to the era of You Inc., where every thought, talent, relationship, and hour of your life must be optimized, monetized, and branded. Where your identity is a product and your value is measured in engagement metrics. This is neoliberalism as culture. Remember when we asked, what if that little voice telling you to hustle harder wasn't yours? Here it is. Neoliberalism reshaped not only how we work, but how we are. It taught us to think of ourselves not as humans in communities, but as individual market actors, constantly investing in our own human capital. This cultural shift didn't happen by accident. It was engineered through schools, social media, job training programs, and yes, even wellness apps. The goal? Make you believe that everything wrong in your life is a you problem. Your anxiety isn't a structural issue, it's a productivity glitch. Your loneliness isn't societal collapse, it's poor personal branding. Real life example? LinkedIn now refers to job seekers as talent brands. Tinder offers date insights. Even grief is now rebranded as resilience. As writer William Davies says, nervous states aren't just personal, they're political. Neoliberal culture weaponizes your insecurities. It turns selfhood into a startup. Everything must scale, everything must perform. Even rest becomes recovery time for increased output later. And if you opt out, you're lazy, irrelevant, or worse, unemployable. This is why so many of us feel burned out, even when we're not doing anything. In a neoliberal world, you're never off the clock. Culturally, this creates a trap. You're told to chase authenticity. So long as it's profitable, you're encouraged to speak out, so long as it doesn't threaten capital. You're empowered until you organize. This isn't just hustle culture, it's hegemony, a system so deeply embedded that resisting it feels like failing yourself. But here's the key insight. You didn't choose this, it was built. And like all built systems, it can be unbuilt. In the next section, we'll confront the contradictions, the paradoxes where neoliberalism shows its cracks. Neoliberalism claims to liberate, to make us free through markets, data, and competition. But in its attempt to measure everything, it ends up erasing what can't be priced and cracking under its own contradictions. Let's amplify those paradoxes. 1. It promises freedom, but reduces freedom to buying power. We're told we're free because we can choose between iPhones, but that freedom doesn't extend to housing, healthcare, or even clean water. If you can't afford it, your freedom evaporates. What's left is the illusion of choice wrapped in the reality of exclusion. 2. It defeats totalitarianism only to resurrect it algorithmically. The post-war neoliberals claim to oppose fascism, but what is surveillance capitalism if not digital authoritarianism? Corporations track every move, predict every click, and profit from your every emotion, without your consent, without recourse. 3. It claims to depoliticize, but reprograms politics as a market. Democracy becomes a game of ads, polls, and marketing consultants. Voters become consumers, issues become brands, and the public sphere becomes another feed to scroll past. What was once a space for debate is now a marketplace of impressions. And here's the final contradiction. To dismantle neoliberalism, we must first name it. But the very language we use, value, cost, investment, return, is already infected. It's like trying to clean a wound with poisoned water. So where do we go from here? We stop, we look, we speak new words, because the moment you name the paradox, you break the spell. And from that crack, new futures can grow. Here's what neoliberalism doesn't want you to know. It's not inevitable, it's not eternal, and it's not the only way to live. The system we've just unmasked is powerful, but it's also fragile. It runs on consent, confusion, and compliance. But once you see it, really see it, the spell starts to break. So what do we do with that knowledge? Language matters. When we call everything a market, we erase other forms of being, community, justice, love. Reclaim words, call things by their names. Philosophy is defense. Without moral reasoning, democracy becomes a data problem, not a human conversation. Think, question, argue, reclaim value. Value must be rooted in public reasoning, not private preference. Not what sells, but what sustains. You are not a brand. You are not a bundle of assets. You are not a line item on someone else's profit sheet. You are a person in a world that must be remade. There is no alternative, Thatcher said. There always is. Watch the next video. How neoliberalism failed and what a better society could look like, where we move from critique to construction, exploring alternatives rooted in justice, solidarity, and human dignity.